Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. This is the GB210 Racing Edition quadcopter from GearBest. This kit, you don't have to figure out what will work with what. You've got your 2205 Emax red bottom motors. You've got your 20 amp ESCs. You've got your F3 flight controller, your frame, your PDB. That's already sourced for you. The only choices you have to make is what camera VTX do you need. And then you throw in a battery strap and a battery lead, and you're all set to go. So let's take a look to see how it's put together. We've got everything set out, and we've got our frame. There are two styles of mounting brackets here. You can do one for a side mounting, or you can do one where you push it through. Top plate, bottom plate, our propellers, our ESCs. This is our PDB, our flight controller, and our motors. Some things that I have off frame, which would be the standoffs. They're all aluminum standoffs, I believe. Bag of screws. We have the screws that come with the motors. What else is over here? We have the nylon lock nuts that are flange lock nuts, so those are nice. The motors also come with an extra bushing, and I believe that's an E-clip. And then you have some of the motors come with the black, I think that's the clockwise and counterclockwise. What you don't see pictured is any nylon standoffs. So you'll need to hit up eBay or somewhere and pick up a little kit like this. Has a bunch of different sizes in here. It has some female, some female, male. But we'll need those to mount up our PDB and our flight controller. This is my first time using this PDB, and I noticed that it came with a nice set of color instructions. And these are the only instructions you're going to get in this kit. Okay, well, let's clear it off and let's get started with the motors and the ESCs. Got my calipers out here. Let's measure this frame. Bottom plate. 3mm bottom plate, top plate, 1.5 mm. And for curiosity, camera looks to be 1, and the other camera mounting plate is 1 as well. So there we have our measurements for that, and then the weight of the frame. Frame itself is 69.4 grams. Of course, you're going to have some additional weight with your nylon screws and your standoffs, but the bare weight of the frame is 69.4. Of course, we need to mount up our PDB, and I'm going to use the smallest nylon male female I have, and a nylon screw. It's straightforward as you might expect, so I'm going to push that up to the bottom and just thread this on. So that's one. I got to do that 4 more times. I like to have the PDB mounted. That way it's not moving around as I try to solder the ESC wires. And I want the PDB mounted before I do any cutting of the PDB wires, or not the PDB wires, the ESC wires or motor wires, because I want to make sure they can fit. In this case, I hope to have enough length of motor and ESC wire to where I can wrap the motor wires around the ESCs to keep as much motor length as I can. In my particular case, the reasoning behind that is I crash a lot, and if a motor wire comes loose because of all my crashing, I want to have extra to go back to. Because this frame has a top plate that has a little notch to where our battery leads can come up through, and then we mount our battery on top. We want the battery leads to come out the back side. And if you can see above those two pads above my finger, it says BAT. So that's how we're going to mount this. Okay, all the motors have arrows on them on the top. Show us the direction of spin. So this one is going to be turning clockwise, so it would go either here or here, because we want the propellers to spin in towards the nose and in towards the tail. And this one spins counterclockwise, so it would go here or here. Another one. This one would go here now. And this one goes here. Then we have our ESCs printed right on them, 2 to 4S. And I'm going to probably need to cut back some of this back so I can solder these on. But what I want to check, if I put that here, do I have enough? Yeah, we can manipulate that to get to those leads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this top edge out, and then we'll get to desoldering these. We're going to do them on all 4. Okay, to do this I'm just going to use my little wire snips here. Just going to dig an edge in. This heat shrink they've gone on here, it does feel kind of nice. It doesn't feel real hard and plastic. You know, sometimes you'll get these and they have kind of a really rigid feel to them, like it's not actually heat shrink. I don't want to get this stuff on my iron, it stinks. Sometimes. So you can see I've got that exposed now, and I'll be able to desolder that. So I'm going to do that on the rest of the ESCs. We've got one motor mounted up, and you should note that inside the screw kit comes with 2 different sizes of screws. I am using the shorter screw. We want to make sure those screws catch the motor housing, but we don't want them touching the windings. We have our soldering iron good and hot, so we're going to use some blue tack, and we're going to take these ESC wires off. I'll be heating from this side and pulling from this side. Make sure that's good and stuck down. I'm going to add a little bit of solder to my iron, if it will stick on there. You want to get in and out. Alright, just like that, do that 4 times. ESCs are all ready to go. If this is your first build, I would suggest that you just take these extra wires that we just took off the ESCs and save them somewhere. It's a nice silicone wire, and that's good quality stuff if you don't already have some of that. And maybe just save it for a little repair or patch job you might need to do later on. If I were to put the ESCs flat on the frame, I would probably put some black electrical tape underneath it. In this case, because I'm going to be wrapping, I'm not going to do that. The only reason I do that is just an added layer of protection to make sure that we don't get a short off our ESCs. So let's get to work on this. So you can route the ESC wires anywhere you want, any way you want up between here. We just want to get it through, and we want to keep them straight through. Want to make sure that we don't get anything crossed, because remember, these motors are already set to spin a certain direction. So I'm going to put them about here. This is my middle wire. This is my outside wire. This is the inside wire. Now these are stripped kind of long, so I'm going to cut them back and tin them up. Initially I didn't think these were tinned up, but they are tinned. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of my own solder to it, just to make sure it sticks good. Bring our ESC back. Oops. So we've got the wires all laid out flat. To hold this all in place, I'm going to again bring in my blue tack. Squish it in there good. You could also use a piece on this side if you wanted to be certain it was going to be flat. I'm going to use my curved needle nose. I think I got these for $1.99 from Harbor Freight. And add a bit of solder down here too. We don't want to spend a lot of time with the heat on there. So again, we're going to get in and out. That looks like my blue tack's a little bit in the way. Hold it on there a second. Give it a pull test. All set. Make sure we get the middle wire. Got to look at it from an angle. This is my outside wire, this is my middle wire. There we go. So we got our motors on there. We would kind of work these down to make them a bit flatter. Use our blue tack a little bit like tape here. And we're going to go to the ESC pads. First thing we should do is go ahead and tin them all up. We don't have to cover those contacts, we just need some on there. The VTX I'm going to be using is this Dragonfly. Got it for $25. It's a lot like the Hawkeye with the lead, but this one has an LED display and a push button rather than dip switches. And if you can see there, it runs off a 12 volt. So, and it also has an on-off switch, which is something else I liked. So I'm going to need to tin up the 12 volt, and we will need 5 volts for our flight controller. So we need to tin those up as well. Now is where I would normally, and I'm going to do this, is I'm going to get some more nylon standoffs from my little kit. And I'm going to put a spacer in here. That way when I put my ESC wires on there, I don't have a hard time getting the spacers back on. You can take these back off, it doesn't matter what size you grab. You just want to make sure that your wires have enough space to go around. I'm just going to use these females. And you can do that from the beginning as well, but I wanted to make it that a point that I was sure to mention. So you can see with these, standoffs that they come very close in contact with the pads, just about in every corner. Now we have our ESC laid out where we want it. We make sure it's exactly where we want it. And on this side, we get a pointer. This is our plus, this is our minus, battery, minus, plus and minus for the other ESC. So we want to get a fix on how long we want our wires to be. It's just an approximation unless you're going for an ultra tight build. If you're going for an ultra tight build, it's probably not your first build. I'm going to have a little bit of slack in there in case something nasty happens. And you can oftentimes strip this thread with your fingernails if you have a little bit. Strip the thread, the insulation, just like that. Or you can use an X-Acto knife. That works just as well. And then our negative. And we tin those up. Make sure all the little threads are together here. All you're doing is starting with bringing some heat to the wire, and then you put this where the heat and the wire connects to make sure it can conduct that heat across the wire, and then you move the solder down the location of the bare wire. I'm going to change the angle a bit on this. Angle that wire down in my little helper. Bring some heat to both. Give a little pull test. Closer inspection. Alright, looks good. So now we just do that around on the others. Alright, we got our ESCs connected to our PDB, our VTX connected to our PDB. It's worth noting that these shorter legs that come in the kit, there's 4 of them, are made for landing legs. They go in right in where these holes, and I've covered them up. I've opted obviously not to use those. Instead of using those, I'm going to use, for landing feet, I'm going to use these. These are just little rubber bumpers from cabinets, or 4 cabinets. You can find them at just about any hardware store. They just peel off and stick off, and they stick on pretty good. So if you clean the surface you're going to stick it to beforehand and then stick this on, it should stay on pretty good. Now, of course, you can buy some foam feet. That's another option. I think they're like $1 a set off of Banggood. I think you can also get some from Luminaire. The Luminaire ones, I believe, are made of neoprene, and the Banggood ones, I believe, are foam. But this is what I'm going to use in this particular case to, supposedly, when I land it nice and flat, it'll land on these rather than the carbon fiber of the quad. Now we've got our ESCs all soldered up. Let's take a look. We need to, let's see, this is the front, this is the back. We need to do our battery lead. So I've got one here that I've scavenged. And what you want to do before you cut your lead, you just want to set your standoffs off, or standoffs on, put the top plate on, and get an estimation of where things are going to be. So you can see that's touching that, and if I put the battery on like this near the center of gravity, it's going to be about right where I want it. Hopefully you can see that. But you want your battery to be as center of gravity as possible. Or you could come up through the side if you wanted to. That's a pretty popular method, coming up through the side. And not through the side, but on the side. In this case, because of PDB, it's going to be a little bit wonky, but you could do that. We've got this notch cut out for our battery lead, goes right in there. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. So we make sure we got everything out of the way. I think I'm going to put a little bit more solder on there. Take our battery lead. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. Put a little pressure. I like to warm them both up by just kind of putting my solder there on the end. Kind of hear it crunching. Do the same thing over here. Get them both kind of warmed up. Give them a pull test. Okay, so then we're ready to start with our flight controller. It's an F3. This arrow points forward. You can use the pins if you wanted to, and then just slide your signal and ground wires on. I'm not a fan of that, primarily due to the fact that if you do this, you've got to run these. Well, you can run these underneath, and you've got to clip these on. It does make for quicker changes if you just use the pins, but then if you have a camera that leans back, you're limited on how far that camera can lean, or you're limited on the camera options itself. I'm going to use a run cam on this. It has we can use these side camera plates, so it really wouldn't be much of an issue for me, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and solder these on. But before I do that, I am going to jump back here. I noticed something earlier, and hopefully we can get the camera to focus on this. It's really small. And let me get something to point with here as well. If you look really closely, you can see the words 3.3 volts. Come on, focus camera. I'm going to have to do it like this, aren't I? You can see where it says 3.3 volts. Well, those aren't even solder pads. Those are off of this, I believe. So this flight controller in this particular case is mislabeled a little bit. If you look at a schematic of a Seriously Pro F3, you'll find that the 3.3 label should be down here on this pad. So I'm going to solder my voltage here, and then I am going to put the negative here, and then the signal here. And I'll wire that up from the bottom, and this is the cable. In this particular case, I'm going to use this Redcom. It's a DSM-2X compatible. The big difference between this and the satellite, it's about the same price. I think this was $7 or $8. It's got a bind button down in there, so I wanted to give that a try. Okay, I've cut my wires to length. All I'm going to do is go from these spots we just mentioned, and I'm actually going to have this just sit on the top, probably with some double-sided foam tape or something like that. And so I didn't have far to go, so I cut my cable. Now I'm just going to tin the wires. Okay, got those tinned up. Probably not going to be able to see this. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm going to add a little of my own solder down here to this pad. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out a touch. You can see I've got those all tinned up. Oop, wrong pad. Okay, I had to step back because I failed to do one thing. I forgot I needed to have these two shorter just to make these kind of all seamless here. So our black line goes over here. Hopefully you can see this. I know I barely can. Okay. And then our signal, let's get this untwisted. Probably going to get my soldering iron right in the way on this one. Little pull test. Looks good. Next we're going to need power to our flight controller, so I'm going to run right off the 5 volts here because that's what our flight controller works off of. I'm going to do the red first. I want to run it this way So then we put our flight controller on. I'm just going to use a couple of nylon screws to hold it in place so we can work with it here. Sorry, I'm blocking your view. This a little bit. That was one. So it's loosely on there. I just want to get a fix. I'm just going to go to the plus and minus on what would be equivalent to the motor 8. So I just want to get a fix on how long about I need those. Give myself a little pinching room. If you had ESCs with BECs on them, we wouldn't have to do this. But the kit doesn't come with that, so keep your extra wires laying around. You never know when you're going to use them. Try to tin these up flying in the air here. Okay. I'm going to get my curvy needle nose out. I'm going to put a little hook in both of these wires. You could poke them through the hole and then solder them down. It's another perfectly acceptable method. I'll snip that one a little bit short. The burn back there. Okay, so when it's all powered on, the 5-volt power this. And now what we need to do is we want to route all of our, well, we're not going to do them all at the same time. I do them one at a time. But we want to route our ESCs wires underneath. Make sure everything stays inside the frame. Get an approximation of about how much we need. Snip it off, tin it up, solder it down. So this is the first one we're doing. It's going to go to the spot we see on the board that has a 1 by it. So signal wire goes up on the S row, black goes down on the ground wire. Put a little bend in these. Oh, I forgot to tin them up. So we'll do that real quick. I tend to do the ground first. Then oftentimes when I get done on these little tiny wires, I'll come back with hot glue and I'll put hot glue in the area. Hot glue comes off real easy and it gives us another layer of protection if the solder happens to break down. And I'll also do that down here for our VTX on the 12 volt and to power our flight controller the 5 volt down here. I don't do it for the larger wires because there's enough solder there. It should hold, and if it doesn't, then hot glue isn't going to do the job. So we got motor 1 done. We would need to proceed to motor 2, 4, and then 3. And you just line them up all across there. When we come back, I'll have that done. Okay, we're back. We're all soldered up. And the reason why I try to get all my wires coming in through the same direction is that so that if we need to, we can get to the bottom of the flight controller, or we can get to the PDB. If we've got all our wires coming in from all these different directions, then we have to take something off in order to be able to get any action underneath here at all. You can see I put my hot glue on there, and I've got my hot glue up here. It looks a little messy, but that will help ensure that if something does come loose, we're more likely to just have it fall out of the sky than for it to hit something else and short something out. Plus it also helps shore things up just a bit. So we put these nylon screws back in, and we're so close. We need to next do our, we've got our VTX right here, and next would be our camera. We've got the FPV gear set up here, or at least the camera. I've got my receiver attached to the top plate, so that'll go together last. This particular camera comes with silicone wire, so it's real nice to work with, and you can see when it follows convention, such as voltage being red and negative being black and signal being yellow with video, it's just straightforward. Connect yellow to yellow, red to red, black to black, and you're all set. And there are a few things left to do. Nothing really with the physical build. I just need to connect this up, secure all my screws, go around one more time, make sure everything's good and snug. Also, there is outside of this video, there's a number of things you need to do before you fly. One, you need to set up your receiver and bind it to your transmitter. You need to check in clean flight to make sure you've got stick travel and that it goes between 1,000 and 2,000 and your midpoints are around 1,500 or very, very close. You need to set up any switches on your radio that you want to use and the modes associated with those switches, whether it's arming mode or air mode, whatever. You also need to calibrate the ESCs, which is pretty simple. Do that about the same time with your props off. Check your motor rotation, make sure that they're moving in the direction. They're supposed to be moving towards the nose and towards the tail. So this way and this way, just like the arrows on these motors that you see before you. And then you need to verify that you've got video on your FPV gear. And that's really about it. I'm going to finish connecting this up and go through those steps I just mentioned, and then we'll go do a line of sight hover. One other thing you should do is test your failsafe. So bring up your motors with your radio, turn the radio off, make sure the failsafe kicks in and does what you want it to do. In clean flight you have two different failsafes. You can have it just stop the motors and it will fall out of the sky, which many people use, or you can use what clean flight calls land, which is just a low throttle setting. There's also a few other settings in there you can take a look at. But this video is about the build. It's about the Dubai 210 here from GearBest. And remember that the FPV gear and your battery cable, your XT60, all your receiver, all those things you have to source yourself. They don't come in the kit. There's also a 30 amp version of this and a pod version. If you're not familiar with a pod, that's where everything is stacked in the center and it's just a true X. So it's kind of like lopping off the tail and the nose and then everything's stacked up. Those are very popular for racing as well. I'm going to finish this up and we're going to go do some testing. Alright, we got our radio on. Put the switch down for horizon mode. Plug it in. My battery is just a little bit low. Trim that. Okay, here we go. Whoa. Needs some tuning. Got some oscillations there just a little bit. Flyable though, just like it is with the defaults. It has got a lot of power though. I'm not going to be able to fly this in the backyard very easily. Easy catches with all that power.
going to switch into rate mode here just to see if it still oscillates. Sometimes you get oscillations in horizon mode, which I'm in right now. You can tell it's self-leveling. So switching to rate mode. Still a little bit. But not as bad. Alright. Here comes that wind. Back into horizon mode there. Let's bring it down. Seems like it's on the roll axis.
There you have it. This is a great little starting kit. It would be nice if this wasn't necessarily a clone. If you're looking to get into a 5-inch quad, this is a very reasonable kit to get. They're about 150 bucks right now, and you're nearly ready to go. You can fly this line of sight if you had a battery lead and a receiver. If you have your own radio, you're set to go. Otherwise, if you want to do FPV, you're going to need a camera, you're going to need a VTX, you're going to need an antenna. This kit also comes in other forms. They have kits labeled GB210, which is of course 190 millimeter wheelbase. That comes with FPV, and they also have kits that are rated for a 30 amp ESCs. So if you run 4S and you really want to push things, I would highly encourage you to get the versions that have the 30 amp ESCs. It's going to be a lot safer to run. You'll be less likely to blow. But this thing has all sorts of power. You know, you've got a 210, and you're running 2205 motors, and not just any old 2205 motors. These are the red bottoms, which can be hard to get. At least they were for a time. I'm pretty happy with it. The only thing that I might change is actually all camera, so that has nothing to do with the kit. I need to figure out some camera settings for this so you can see kind of a jitter, and I think that jitter is actually in the camera itself. It might be LC filtering, but I'll get that sorted out. So if you have any questions or comments, leave those in the section down below, and I'll be sure to help as best I can. The first thing I would recommend you do is get some different props. You're going to need more props anyways, but the props out of the box are really unbalanced, so you can either balance those, or you can get props that are already come pretty well balanced. These are King Kong props. You can actually see, where is it? Yeah, right there, if you can focus on that. King Kong. Generally, these come pretty well balanced out of the box, so you don't have to think about them balancing them too much. You can just do a quick check and then pop them on. If you have any questions or comments, leave those in the section down below. I'll link this product as well as the other products that are closely associated, and you can take a look at all those different products, check them out. If you're looking to get into a 5-inch quad, I think these are very good options. You've got pod options, you've got options that come with an FPV kit already installed. So if you don't want to go through and pick out the different bits and pieces to put together, there's options available that you can just select a kit and then put it together yourself. Okay, that's all I have. Look for future videos of more flying of this 5-incher. Thanks for watching.